يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. It is once again a Saturday morning and great to be with you. We will be on the show together till 10 o'clock and as always, lines are open if you would like to become a part of the conversation. So what are we looking at this morning? Counseling with the lovely Rahima Khalik Mohammed. We're also looking at leadership with an attorney. He is Mohammed Patel, and we're going to kick off by talking architecture, interior design, and everything you've ever wanted to know about building and the decoration of your home. And to talk to us about architecture and why it is such a fulfilling profession are two lovely young ladies. They are Famida Osman and Ilham Tayyib, and I think they both hail from Tswani. So let's welcome the ladies and let's talk architecture, interior design, and all those wonderful things that we, especially women, like getting busy with in our homes, especially our new homes, or when we commission a home to be built. Famida, assalamu alaikum, and Ilham, welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
Lovely to have you guys here. And I'm looking at two very young, trendy ladies and wondering how you decided that you wanted to do architecture as a profession. Let's start with you, Famida.
When I was younger, I was very fortunate enough to travel to many exciting places. I was exposed thus to many historic buildings, various cultures, unique personalities. Architecture is in service of the people, thus it went hand in hand. I do appreciate good design as well and how space and form work together.
So what you're saying to me really is architecture is a form of art.
Yes, it is a form of art in combination with science.
Mm-hmm. And you need to have a good eye for it, don't you? Especially as far as detail is concerned.
You do learn that along the way. There are many challenges that crop up, but it can be very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Ilham, your story as far as architecture is concerned.
From my side, I grew up with family members who are in the architectural career, and so I got exposed to it at a young age. I remember coming home to my cousin building a model for a presentation the next day, and I was just fascinated with this idea of building with your hands and creating and designing. And that kind of just stuck with me, and I carried on with it. And I kind of knew from the start that this is what I wanted to get into.
I understand you've just completed your master's.
Yes.
What does that mean for your work, and where do you guys work?
So last year I completed my master's at the University of Pretoria.
Congrats.
Jazakallah. It was a big challenge for me, but shukr, we came through. And so what that means is now I've completed my studying career and I've gone into my working career. This year I started working at Aziz Tayyib Architects. And what I'm doing is completing my hours. So I'm a candidate architect at the moment. And once my hours are complete, I write a practical exam and I become a professional architect.
You are a professional architect.
Yes,
okay.
I have written the exam.
All right.
A while ago.
Now, when we talk architecture, I look around me. I have a sister living in Tswane, and I remember, I mean, she's been married forever, but I remember in her early years, having moved from Johannesburg to Pretoria, when we visited her, there was all of these open spaces between Johannesburg and Pretoria. They vanished. There's just such a lot of rapid
Urban
growth,
and rapid development, both urban and industrial and light industrial, meaning that obviously more and more people are migrating to the big cities. What does that mean for people and housing, Famida?
I think that Ilham has this covered.
I think there's a big change happening in architecture right now. Previously, obviously, well, it depends on what sector you're looking at, but it was housing in the suburban areas. And now what's happening is because of urban sprawl and sort of densification, people are moving back closer to the city because of sort of square meters, etc., and you're trying to maximize your space as much as possible. So there's a big shift in terms of what does community need and what does society need and what architecture used to be and what it needs to become. So going from you still get your beautiful houses, and there's always going to be that sort of facet of architecture, but now it's especially at campus, we're starting to sort of look more into the social sort of impact of architecture and how it can start looking at housing in the inner city without excluding people who are traditionally living there, but start including those from the suburban outsprawls, so that you start getting these spaces that allow for not just you're working in the city, you're living in the city, and you have that advantage of being central, where with the urban living, you've had to travel half an hour, you got to move here, you got to move there. And so you see that change in living. It's much fast-paced living is now becoming
I think that also you need to consider the environment with which the building is being built.
That's
we
very
have to
important,
be very
isn't
sensitive
it?
to the areas around it and how that is affected by the growth of the
Yeah.
So Femira, you're talking about be sensitive to the environment. That's really crucial because if we're going to go, focusing on density, urban planning and trying to accommodate for the masses, you're going to have one or two things: very grey, unhealthy buildings and high rises, which is going to cut out natural light and so forth. So how do you as architects plan around that scenario, ensuring that you have enough greenery, open air and freshness as well?
I think that it's very important that we create spaces that people feel comfortable in, that are inspired and that bring about a sense of security.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very important to go from a scale, when you're designing, you're not just designing on this plot and this is the house. You need to look at the larger scale, you need to look at the environment around it to bring in those green spaces, to bring in community spaces, to bring in private spaces, and then integrate it all into sort of a woven fabric that then goes down into the details that you do in your house. So
A lot of the Islamic architecture is focused around creating living spaces.
They have those
courtyards.
Yes, yes.
And you're able to like slide the doors open, thus like ventilation is like easy and it's breezy.
privacy.
And privacy. It provides for privacy as well.
I think that would be the
I think
answer
one
to
of the
a lot of our...
this is actually a house that we've done in the Pretoria area, and it had like a central courtyard with the living areas that were north facing, the bedrooms especially, and then the services were grouped more in the front of the house.
It looks very functional as well.
Yes, it's very pragmatic, very practical.
Right.
Because it needs to be able
minimal
to...
maintenance
Yes.
is what I'm picking up from
Face
here.
timeless as well.
I think the
Yeah.
materials that are used are also face brick in the sense that you don't need to paint the building.
But of course, face brick does come at a cost. Let me just, Ilham, let me ask this question of you. I'm thinking the large centres all around the world, your Londons, New Yorks,
Yes.
etc. Very especially New York, high rise, and that's because people are wanting to live and work in the cities. They're having to compromise on open air, open spaces, parks, etc. And they're having to go into high rises. Do you think we in South Africa are heading that way?
I don't really see that trend happening. You do see it in the inner
Centre,
city.
yeah,
In
the
the inner
Centre
city,
area.
in the Centre area, Maboneng is becoming that type of space as well, especially for students. We are slowly going there, but we're still kind of in our suburban areas. We like our gardens, we like our open space.
I think also in the Sandton area, I think a lot of buildings now are considering rooftop gardens. So there are spaces in the city that people can find, like they can be in nature and overlook obviously the Johannesburg skyline.
Yeah.
So they have their rooftop gardens plus the added bonus of a view,
Yeah.
Yes.
which is amazing. What about gentrification? We're hearing this term a lot. What does it mean, and how's it going to impact on not only urban living, but people on the fringes of urban spaces as well?
Yeah, you see, the issue is now that everyone wants to move back into the city and live the city life. There were people that were living in the city when we weren't. And we need to be very careful not to displace these people, because this is their
have to
homes.
be sensitive.
We need to be
yeah.
very sensitive,
Yeah.
and it's a slow transition that needs to happen. And with gentrification, what we see happening, Maboneng is an example of this to a certain extent, where people come in, they develop the area, and costs rise phenomenally, and people who live there just can't afford to live there anymore, and are slowly basically pushed out.
And then
of
where
the
do they
city
go?
center.
Where do
so
they
they're
live?
displaced in that way.
Yeah.
So there needs to be, I think, with city development, a lot of the research is going into how do you kind of look at a mixed example of low income housing, mixed income housing, and then sort of higher income housing, and how can we all live together in that type of space. So there's a lot of social challenges that come with that type of
Now, we
research.
know Johannesburg CBD is a typical example, and I think it happens in large cities all around the world, that people move out of the city, they move to the suburbs. The cities then start, in some instances, start decaying, or that you get people squatting in the buildings, and a lot of decay starts happening. Going forward, as architects, do you believe that there's a solution to something like this? And I know it does involve big sums of money, but what is the ideal scenario for those decaying buildings in the inner cities, which have been overtaken by squatters, for example? And I know the big thing is not displacing the people, but you also want to preserve what you have, and those are solid buildings.
But I think it doesn't only include architects. There needs to be a collaboration with the different
Government, city
yes.
councils.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not something that we can solely have an idea on. We are idealistic, but we need to also be
Being
practical.
idealistic, what would you like to see? Ideally, what would you like to see happening there?
These buildings are beautiful, and I think heritage architecture comes into play when working with those type of buildings in the city, because they built to last. To last, and if we just
we need to keep the value of that.
The heritage of that building, and sort of adapt it in a way that looks at. I think that's where the low income housing, mixed income, and sort of high income come into play. So you renovate the building, but allow for the lower income, to allow for those people who are living there currently to have the opportunity to stay at the space, and then allow more people to come into the space, so that the building kind of gets its value back to what it was.
I think that's what they basically are trying to do in the Johannesburg CBDs. They're trying to uplift the people that are there by bringing in new clients.
Sadly, I think that people who are living in good buildings and the upmarket areas, I'm wondering if they would allow low-cost housing in their immediate vicinity. So
I think generally people are very uncomfortable with change, and they need time to adapt, and it doesn't happen overnight. It happens through a process of time.
What's the difference between Art Deco buildings and heritage buildings?
I think Art Deco is basically a style that was...
it's a style of architecture.
Yes.
Very sculptural sort of elevations.
Ornamental.
Ornamental in a way. And then heritage buildings is just... it's the age of the building.
Yeah, so it must be, I think, over 60.
Yeah,
Your Herbert Baker type of buildings.
Yes, I think there are like certain even restrictions and regulations where you have to actually keep the shell of the building, and you are allowed to modify the building as long as it doesn't affect the overall aesthetic. Yeah.
I know of someone who lives in near Parktown, I think it's in Saxonwold or Forest Town, and they've bought this heritage building. They want to they obviously want to modernize the inside, but I think they've been given permission to modernize inside of the house, but not to change the facade at all. They are very strict.
I think as in
limits.
architecture, you actually can specialize in that field, and you can study further, in the sense that you have to be able to be a visionary, and you have to be able to see the potential of the building.
Okay, time for an ad break. We will continue this discussion right after. I'm talking to Famida Osman and Ilham Tayyib. Both are architects. They're here to talk to us about something that they're very passionate about, and that's their profession, and why they encourage other young people to follow them or to choose architecture as a profession. Stay with us. We'll be back right after the ad break. We're talking architecture with two architects, both qualified, working together. They'll remind us who they work for. It is Famida Osman and Ilham Tayyib, talking architecture, and off air they've just been telling me that they'd like to see more girls, young girls, coming into this profession because they feel very fulfilled, and of course they are very arty and creative, and they believe they are in the right space, and I should imagine at the right time as well. Back to you guys and architecture, your passion and your work, your profession. In terms of challenges and risks going into this type of work, what would you say one should be looking out for?
I think one has to be prepared to work very hard. There are very long hours. You have to be committed to be able to push past obstacles. As a female in the industry, it is male-dominated. So you have to gain the respect of your colleagues as well as the contractor on site. And you will come up against many challenges. You have to persevere, and hopefully with a lot of perseverance, you are able to overcome those obstacles. It can be very rewarding, fulfilling. You grow as a person. And what would you say are the challenges that you faced?
I think in terms of challenges, I just come out of the university sort of environment, and for me going from, it's a different world from what I grew up in. You living with your parents, you have their support, and all of a sudden you're on your own, you're working till 2 o'clock in the morning,
right.
And crazy hours, you can't go to your cousin's wedding because of a presentation. So it requires a lot of sacrifice, but I think any career in general requires that type of sacrifice. It is stressful, but it's very rewarding at the end of the day when you're able to do something that you love.
You have to have like an intense passion, like a burning desire,
right,
to be able to create spaces that are in service of the people, and that's inspiring in itself. It's a contribution to the community.
Now, in terms of, I know you work for a company, just remind me who you work for.
Architect.
It's a Pretoria-based firm.
All right.
Yes.
Obviously, that means that you wouldn't necessarily conceptualize and implement a project from beginning, from start to finish, because you work for a company. There are lots of people involved, so you can't claim the project or claim it as your own.
Yeah, it's a collaborative
effort. It's a team
yes.
effort, obviously, but still, it must be very fulfilling.
It is.
Definitely. I think we get involved in I'm just coming into this company this year, and I've learned so much because you come into doing a residential development,
and
for
commercial, community, government.
It's a big sector of work.
So there's lots of learning that goes on as well.
learning.
But that being said, obviously you have a dream project in mind, through your schooling and your university years, and you, Famida, as well. You've been working for a couple of years now. We all have dreams. We all have hopes and aspirations. And being architects, you must have that dream in your mind. What would it be for you, Ilham? And let me just go on to add that one of my favorite programs on TV is the Home Channel, The Best Houses. I've just got a thing about it.
I think, with architecture, you can actually branch off into many different design-related fields. A lot of people that are architects have then furthered their studies either in fashion design or furniture design, product design, interior architecture. That is something that I'm interested in. But I'll let Ilham
just before you go there, and I
Yeah.
understand there's a video clip that we're going to have a look at as well. You talk about all these different branches. So what you're really saying is that there are huge opportunities. You can go into any field.
that's design related. It's a creative
It's a very
field.
versatile field. I think you learn how to design, and you can apply those skills in the workforce in whichever sort of career you go into. I mean, once you leave university, it's not just limited to designing buildings.
Or you can work your hours, qualify as an architect, so to speak, and then branch out into any field,
Any
that
niche
takes
that you feel that
definitely.
that serves your interest, basically.
That's one.
Something that I've been being able to do on the side because of my design experiences, event planning and sort of stage design, and I've learned that because of my background in design, and so that's just an example of what you can do besides for architecture.
And interior design would also fall under that umbrella.
I think it's called now interior architecture. You get like interior decoration, interior architecture. Interior architecture is more about the designing of the space, the internal space within a building, and interior decoration is more surface treatment and surface decoration.
What about style, form of a building and color? When you look at a building, very especially the modern buildings, we've talked Art Deco and we've talked about the heritage sites, so we know what they look like. But going forward, a lot of people going for ultra modern designs. What is the lifespan of those? You know, all glass houses, and they're ultra modern. I'm kind of thinking 20 years hence, are the owners or the people living in those spaces still going to feel as passionate and happy about those spaces?
I think the problem that we're currently sitting in is an environmental one. It's that it's not a very practical.
Feasibility.
What's the feasibility of this type of project? It's when you have your glass skyscrapers, how much are you spending on air conditioning to keep it cool in the summer and to keep yourself warm in the winter? So I think we're learning to move away from that type of style because of how we've realized it's beautiful to look at, but it's not.
It needs to be functionally aesthetic as well. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a practicality. I think as a challenge that we face as a designer is that we have to be able to meet clients' needs as well as retain our identity as a designer, and we have to
also
then
guide them on the right path. Okay, I understand that we're going to be looking at a clip, and also we're going to talk to you, but we've got very little time left. So also your project.
This is just an example of the type of work you do on campus for anyone watching that would like to maybe get into it at some point. It's an example of a mosque that I worked on in Marabastad for my honors year. And the clip kind of shows how light.
Right, there we go. Yes.
How light can play a role in adapting space, and how light can then change the quality and nature of space. And so just something as simple as, especially light in Islamic architecture, is such an important component. In this video, you'll see how the space transitions between, it goes from a well-lit museum space to a soft-lit exhibition space to an event space, and how this can all be changed according to a sort of system that was designed.
Lighting system.
A lighting system.
Okay, so you also, I think the new thing at the moment is what they refer to as mood lighting.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's that all about?
You can have a look here in terms of, in this project I looked at natural lighting, and the systems that I played was skins on the building that were able to adapt to allow for different natural light in and to filter that light and create softer light, etc. So yes,
I think there's a lot of psychology that also goes behind architecture, in that we have to be able to make people feel safe. And
when I walk into a building, whether it's a home or a shopping center or a store, for example, I want to feel good. I want to feel uplifted. I want to have this love. The ambiance must make me feel safe and happy, and just kind of elevate my mood. Do you work around that as well?
I think there are a lot of design elements that come into play. You can create spaces that can allow a person to feel comfort by use of color, or the way elements are placed within the space, columns. It can be to determine direction or guide a person through a space, basically.
We're coming to the end of the show. Unfortunately, I do wish we had more time. But let's look at color. We spoke about forms of building and structures, and you've indicated the issue around ultra-modern buildings, what one needs to be aware of, because it's going to be extra costs, etc. In time. Color, in terms of interiors, or even exteriors for that matter, do you find that they go through, you have something trending now for this season or this period or for 5 years, and then they change? Or is it now, does that not hold true any longer? Is it all about you as a person, your personality and your taste?
It's best to actually meet the client's personality as well. But saying that, it needs to be able to stand the test of time. It needs to be practical in the sense that you rather work on a neutral palette and change like a surface treatment. So maybe furniture or like the tiles that you choose would basically be something that will be able to last.
Stand the test of time.
Yes,
Exactly.
and you don't want to be bored of something.
Right. Okay, we've got 1 minute to wrap up. What
Okay.
does your dream home look like? Very quickly.
I think it changes all the time.
Okay.
But definitely would have a courtyard and a connection to nature, bringing maybe the outside in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Ilham?
I like warm timber surfaces, and I just imagine that happening somewhere in nature as well, looking out over into a nice, beautiful view.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a really big house, though.
No.
I think
something small, warm, and content.
Okay, and that's where we leave it. It's been lovely chatting to you girls. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing it. And one last shout out to all the young ladies watching us to become or thinking of following your footsteps. What would you say to them?
I would say that they need to really have a love for design and persevere past the obstacles, because it can be rewarding. They need to find meaning in it, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really encourage, especially women, to come into this career field. It's very rewarding,
daunting,
but it's versatile, and it allows you to go into many directions depending on how your life carries out, and that's why I really love it.
But there is an increase in the built environment in general.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. I can't
for
wait
having
to... My pleasure entirely. I'd love to see your homes. I'm sure they are stunning. But you guys take care. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your expertise and your passion with me on the show this morning on architecture.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. The two lovely ladies, Ilham Tayyub and Fahmida Osman, they're both from Tswane and talking to us about architecture as a profession, and you can hear just how passionate they are about it. Still to come on the show, we're going to be talking leadership, and we'll also be talking counselling. So do stay with us, and remember, lines will be open throughout the show. We now have Mohammed Patel in studio with us. He's a lawyer, and he was also a very active member of the SRC in his university days. He's been a very busy young man, and apart from being on the SRC, he also went on a leadership program whilst he was studying. I think he took some time out and decided to go on a leadership program. And I've heard some great things about this young man. And I often wonder, what is it that shapes our young people? Is it these programs that we send our children on? Is it us as parents that make an impact on them? Is it the people, the environment, the people that they interact with? What exactly is it that shapes people who go on to become leaders? And this young man very definitely is one of those people. He's someone to watch, and I think he's going to become quite a leader in his own right. Mohammed, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having me here, and to all the viewers out there. Hopefully you're having a lovely Saturday morning.
Thank you for being with us, and undoubtedly the reason I have you here on the show this morning is the fact that you went on a leadership course. This was whilst you were studying.
Yes.
And I think, when I was talking to one of your family members, they kind of said to me that they strongly believe that our children should be exposed to a very vast array of opportunities, the leadership course being one of them. Would you agree?
100%. 100%. The leadership courses that are out there shapes you as an individual, helps you with different aspects of life, and teaches you to be self-sufficient and to be able to do and accomplish anything that your heart desires. And it even helps you with your career paths, both socially and in a work environment.
Tell us about the leadership program that you went on. How long did you attend for? I know it was overseas. And how did you manage to take time out to go and attend this course?
The leadership program I attended was called Al-Azhar University Leadership Program. It was international. It was in Indonesia in December of 2015.
Oh, so it didn't interfere with your studies?
It didn't. It was about 3 weeks long in total. It started in the beginning of December. It ended just in the first week of January. So it was just the VAC period of a university, and it was a lovely course. The way it was shaped, the way it was scheduled, it just taught you basically broke you down and built you up from scratch. For example, when we just entered Indonesia, it was a lovely experience seeing the island itself. And then when we started off sleeping in tents, and at the end of the program, we were sleeping in a hotel. So it really broke you down. It taught you a whole lot of aspects of like a karate aspect of it. So it was both the physical and the mental, and having seminars and integrating with different nationalities. And if I could urge every single South African youth out there to go for programs such as these, it would be an awesome experience in which you'll really gain a lot. And in terms of the pricing wise, it was 3 or 4 weeks long, and the only thing you had to pay for was your flights. Everything else was catered for by this Al-Azhar University scheme that was set up to help individuals gain experience and gain knowledge and gain some qualities that they could use throughout life.
Is it still available as we speak? And how does one go about applying, and what is the criteria for applying?
It's still available. It happens yearly. It's in Indonesia, and the criteria is that you have to go into a website called alazhar.co.com. There's even a South African, it's a South African-based initiative that happens as well. So just Google Al-Azhar and you'll find out the links. And happens yearly. And your second question was.
Criteria.
And the criteria. So you have to be a university student. You have to be between the ages of 19 to 23. And that's your eligibility criteria. And you have to write out a motivation as to why you'd want to gain some leadership experience overseas.
What was the greatest learning for you out of this experience? What do you believe you walked away with?
To be honest with you, in terms of the leadership itself, I just reinforced my current knowledge and of the leadership that was taught, leadership skills that were taught at that time. But one thing I got from this course in particular was the Islamic knowledge that was given to us during that time. I mean, learning Indonesian zikr, going from all 5 salahs throughout the day, going for a Jummah experience in Indonesia, seeing how people were dressed up with their lungi kind of setup. It was that in terms of the dini, new knowledge that I gained, it's second to none. Second to none.
So you would urge all youngsters to perhaps try and take up the opportunity and apply and attend this course. What else did you learn there? I know that the Islamic or the Dini knowledge stands out for you firmly in your mind, but what else did you learn there? You talk about break you down. They start off by breaking you down, taking you back to almost nothing, and then build you up. How did you feel when you were broken down to almost nothing? And what is it that they tell you to break you down? I mean, apart from you sleeping, roughing it up and sleeping in a tent, what sort of messages are leveled at you?
Well, it was very subliminal and physical in terms of just the environment you were put in. So it was a university complex, and obviously us in South Africans, we're very, very privileged. We have running water, we have showers in the morning and so forth. For example, when we landed in Indonesia and we saw the place that we had to stay in, it was a tent, and we were like, okay, where's the bathroom now? We need to make wudu for Zohar Salah. And when we went in there, the bathroom was actually the wuzu khana, and we had to bath with buckets. I've never ever had a shower or had a bath with a bucket in my life. And there was 2 buckets, you had to fill it up with water, cold water.
And you learn fast, don't you?
And it was the first time I had a bath with a bucket after an 18-hour flight.
Right.
And I mean, that just breaks you down because you're not used to this. I mean, I was looking for the nearest hotel and there was nothing within miles. So I mean, in that aspect, and then they were teaching us how to speak. They were teaching us how to read Quran, 1 page per person. I mean, you would assume that everyone knows how to read Quran. And I mean, teaching you 1 page and taking out all the mistakes and teaching us how to read Salah. And so it was basically dini knowledge and from the basics. And I mean, that just teaches you from the start and build you up, and that at the end you could read 1 para a day kind of scenario. And then we even had this physical aspect of like karate. So we just were doing 1 movement, like a sensei teaching you the wax on, wax off movement. And that's where you begin. And they teach.
What do you believe the reason, what was the motivation behind something like that?
It was to shape you from the bottom right to the top with writing skills and everything. So those 3 weeks, it was a very short period of time. But in the beginning, you were sleeping in tents. In the end, as I said earlier, we were sleeping in a hotel. And at the end, you're treated more as an equal than as in you weren't as in the beginning. And there was even a bit of like a ceremony at the end where you walk through the evening and you just go with trust in this jungle kind of scenario. Obviously the days before that they taught you how to walk in a jungle, and then they put you at night with a candle, and then you have to walk through a jungle. I mean, you wouldn't really understand what I'm saying unless you're in the situation, but I mean, those are the aspects that they give you and the ceremony that they have at the end to say that you've actually made it in quite a few skills.
So it's all about building the mind, body, soul and spirit.
100%. That you encapsulated it.
All right, Mohammed Patel is my guest. We're talking to him about the leadership program and a whole host of other programs he's been on. He is a qualified lawyer, and right after the ad break he's going to talk more about his work and also his involvement on the SRC when he was at university, and how this has shaped his life going forward. And you must be wondering, why is it that we're talking to Mohammed this morning? And of course, earlier on we spoke to the two girls, the architects. Well, it's that time of year, and we do know lots of our young people are going to be going to varsity or making career and lifelong choices for themselves. So sharing these stories with other young people from our community hopefully will start the fire in you, will start motivating you, getting you thinking, have you made the right career choice? Is there still opportunity to change track, to change your mind? And it's never too late. And if you haven't decided yet, well, by hearing these young people talking, who knows, you might just change your mind and start with something that you are truly passionate about. Stay with us, lines are open. Let's take our first ad break on this part of the show. Mohammed Patel is our guest. He's a qualified lawyer. He says he's just been working for a mere 9 months. But we started out by talking about the leadership course that he attended in Indonesia. He's also did a stint on the SRC at WITS and a whole host more. Mohammed, you are working now for 9 months. How's work life been compared to being at varsity and, the fun stuff at school?
To be honest with you, it's been a really big adjustment, and I'm not classified as being a qualified lawyer as yet. It's 2 years of
doing
articles,
of course.
So but
you're in the working world.
I have a degree, and I'm qualified to actually go and work. So yes, I'm working now for 9 months. I'm a candidate attorney.
Where?
At a law firm. It's called Motle Juma Sabdia, and it's a medium-sized law firm. It's based in Hatfield and in Houghton, and I'm enjoying it. The hours are standardized across the industry, and it's been a very big adjustment from university to working life. For example, I start work at 7:30 in the morning.
Ooh.
And during the past 5 years up until this year, universities to start at 10. So it's been a really big adjustment.
But at least you've got money in your pocket at the end of the month.
100%. At least I have a smile, and
yes.
I can't wait for the SMS on the 25th of every month. Of course.
Let's talk about the adjustment, and I think this is very important for young people writing matric this year, and inshallah they pass and they go to varsity next year. A lot of people have been, talking about that adjustment. There's no gap year, or there's no intermediary session or year for them to kind of ease into university life. It's almost a shock to your system. Would I be correct in saying that? And how did you adapt to that?
You are more than correct. You are 100% correct in saying that the primary years, from grade 1 to grade 12, doesn't really enable you to actually have a career choice at the end of the 12 years or at the end of the 11th years, because in September of your grade 12, you need to go and you need to apply to university. So university has like a shotgun approach firstly, where they'll give you 3 or 4 subject choices in terms of what career path you want to take, and then hopefully at the end of it, when your marks come out, they say, okay, listen here, you've made it for 1 or 2 choices, and then the student will choose 1 or 2 choices. And coming back to your question,
so not necessarily what you had top of your list.
It's what your academic record tells you that you should be or you could be able to do. That's what it tells you. Coming back to your point on the adjustment, for example, I've been in the SRC, so you actually hear the stats when you're sitting in Senate, University Senate. You sit down and you listen to the stats. For example, in first year engineering, you'll start off with 800 students Okay, at the end of your first year, you only have about 200 people that actually passed, and about 150 people that have made the 40% and could be pushed through to the next year.
So
that's
the
a
dropout
50%
rate is very, very high.
dropout rate on average.
Why?
People aren't enabled. The system, the GDE system, the IEB system, doesn't enable one to go out there and just go out there and study, and firstly the adjustments in terms of classes and times and so forth, but the adjustment in terms of work is like chalk and cheese. You're talking with school, for example. I know I come from a very average home where during the school hours was normal school, and afterwards we used to go for extra maths, extra Afrikaans, extra English, extra bio, extra science. At university there's tutorials, and that's on your prerogative. You can go in and do it. But you're not self-taught to go out there and go through a chapter on your own. You're there to be spoon-fed at school level, and at university you don't know what's happening.
What do you believe should be done to at least assist the first year students at uni? Do you believe the university should take on that responsibility to assist these students, because the dropout rates are horrendous?
For university, there's no resources to actually go out there and pay everyone and to enable students to actually come onto their level. What should happen is in school, we should reform our education system. We should reform it to such an extent as in by the time you're in grade 10 or 11, you should already have an idea, a ballpoint figure of where you want to be in, which kind of sphere of an industry you ought to go to, or you have an industry in. And by having an interest in something, when you go into it and you start learning, like specializing in it, or actually learning more about it, you at least you know what you want to do, or just have an interest in what you want to do, which actually makes you wake up in the morning and say, listen here, I'm going out there and doing something that I want to do, or have an interest in actually doing. And I think by having more, maybe life orientation, for example, making that a more self-centered exercise, as in my interests, my hobbies, having a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and turbulences kind of opportunity to actually see where you can actually, what interests you have and what you would actually enjoy in the future. And maybe having psychology examinations and psychology tests, which actually shows you what kind of career path suits your personality. That's a very, very big aspect. And that's what leads to the dropout rate being so high at universities across the board, not only at WITS, at other universities as well.
Now, university is hard enough as it is, but then people like yourself go on and decide to join the SRC. That comes with a huge responsibility. But what's in it for you? What's in it for a person who joins the SRC?
SRC isn't just something that you can join. So it's a build-up to get into SRC. So I went into university being a law student, and that was in my first year. In my second year, in terms of law student, there's lots of clubs and societies on campus. So a law student, a stepping stone to SRC would be you join the Law Students' Council. So it's law school, and law school has a Law Students' Council, and every faculty has their own student council. So I went, and it's like a baby step. You go and you engage with students. You tell students what you want to do to maybe change the law school, and then you get voted into law school, Law Students' Council. So it's LSC. Then when I was in LSC, I was interested. That was the main aspect. Interested in politics. Interested in for the betterment of students. Then when I was in Law Students' Council, I saw there was many other organizations such as SASCO, such as ANC Youth League, such as YCL, Let's Young Communist League, such as the Muslim Students Association, MSA. I joined all four. I got involved, and that's one thing that we as Muslims should actually get involved in, because it builds you as a person, it builds you as a society, it builds you as a community. So that's what I got involved in, and then I moved up from the YCL and the Young Communist League and the ANC Youth League. I campaigned across the whole of university, and that's when I made it into the SRC. Now, in terms of what did I get out of it? For example, when I was in Law Students' Council, I got to sit with all the professors, all the heads of schools, and I got to it was a bit like a networking opportunity. And obviously, every stage you go up, you get to network more. When I was in the ANC Youth League, you get to meet comrades.
Builds up your confidence as well.
It builds up your confidence, it builds up your networking opportunity.
Your knowledge base as well.
Knowledge base as well. And in the future, if I want to go into a political environment, it's the know-how that you get. I mean, it's not like you're crawling, you'll be running as soon as you get into a position. I mean, if I could run for a post in the community, for example, as a councillor, I would know all the legal jargon, I would know all the political jargon, and I'll have the know-how, the physical know-how. Because that's the thing that we have today, is when people are getting into positions and not having a backstory or not having the leadership build up, then you don't know what to say at the end of the day. You don't know what to do at the end of the day. So that's so. For example, in SRC, when I made it into SRC, out of 15 students that make it into SRC, I came out like number 9 out of the whole university, out of about 48 candidates that were running. So it shows that through the build-up, I could converse with people. And I could go and tap into the needs and wants of people. For example, we have East Campus and we have Medical Campus. On East Campus, it's more of the students that are studying your BA, your engineering and so forth. And when you speak to them, they talk about not being able to get food to eat at night. Talk about not being able to sleep in a place that is safe and secure.
Is that how the fees must fall
arose? Yeah.
We've only got about 2 minutes left, so talk to us about that quickly and how you were active in that whole structure.
So Fees Must Fall started in 2015. It was the first Fees Must Fall. We saw there was a gap where students that were capable of studying at university, the doors of learning were shut to them because they weren't able to afford it. So we said we have to do something about this. It's an injustice done in society. So that's when the whole Fees Must Fall protest began. It spiraled to an extent which was just beyond our imagination. And one of the ways we could actually get people to actually come and do it was to actually block the university entrances. And that's what actually grabbed attention, because we've been preaching this for years. And finally, when we decided to take a step forward and block the entrances to universities, it spread internationally.
Where do we stand now with Fees Must Fall? And I know that you're out of the system,
yes.
But where is that whole situation?
Well, at the moment, we're waiting for the minister. Every year he'll make an announcement around about this time, September, October, as to whether there'll be fee increments for next year. And as soon as we hear that there'll be no fee increments and university is free, that's when Fees Must Fall will stop.
Absolutely. We'll be watching this space. Your closing remarks to especially young people watching us this morning. And we do know that not everybody can qualify to attend that particular leadership course in Indonesia that you attended. But what about other little courses? What is your tip to young people? How do they raise their profile? What ought they be doing?
Stop sitting at home and watching TV. Go out there. Go to your communities, even if you just go to your masjid and go and get involved in youth programs. Go and do it. Widen your environment. You can't be living in a shelf your whole life. Go out there and see what's happening, obviously in a safe and secure environment. Let your parents know where you're going, and go out there and try to have intellectual discussions with people. Join, if you can't make it to university, start a train smash. Just go out there and follow your interests, and hopefully the more people you speak to, you should be able to get to where you want to be at the end of the day.
Inshallah, you're definitely a chip of the old block. I can see you, Sulaiman's son. It was wonderful talking to you, and I do hope and pray, inshallah, that you've touched lives being on the show with me this morning. And no doubt if people follow your path, and we're going to have amazing young people in our community. Go well, and we're going to watch you. I'd like to see, where your career and your life will be in 5 years' time. Go well, our du'as are with you. Mohammed Patel talking to us about young people, dreams and aspirations, and how he has gotten to where he is today. And like I say, definitely a young man to watch. Still to come in the program, we have the lovely Rahima Khalik Mohammed, who will be joining us, and she's going to be talking about social work and a whole host more. And welcome back. We now have the vivacious Rahima Khalik Mohammed. She is going to talk to us about anthropology and mediation. So anything and everything you want to know about this subject, do stay tuned, and do remember, lines will be open, and we're more than happy for you to become a part of the conversation. Rahima, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam, thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And of course, anthropology and mediation, of course, we know what that's all about. So before we get to that, tell us about your background. I presume you studied psychology?
No, well, I actually studied anthropology and politics as my undergraduate studies.
Okay.
My honours and my master's degree then focused on anthropology. My research for my honours was around domestic violence, specifically in the areas of Sophia Town and Claremont in the western areas of Johannesburg. My master's research was around the identity of Muslim women within the middle to upper class parts of Johannesburg.
Gosh, two radicals, radically different masters. Obviously, the one is middle class and upper class women, and then of course you've also, and I understand you work with underprivileged people in the western suburbs of Johannesburg. Are you still doing that work, or was that just part of your research?
So when I had started my research in my honours, I met a group of people who are phenomenal people. They're from the area, they know the people. We were based at the Sophia Town Police Station in the Victims Empowerment Unit. And I encountered people who were not only underprivileged insofar as their economic state currently, but during the apartheid era, they were just not white enough back then, and now they're not black enough, and so they've always been left out. And it's the coloured communities. My mother grew up in Nuclear, so that's close to home for me. But also, you know, at this point, I still do volunteer work for them, and I'm based in Nuclear at the moment. They are people who need help on, you know, all fronts, their emotional, their psychological, the conflict they deal with within their families, drug addiction, abuse, from people who are in their families, from their next door neighbors, you know, conflict on that case. My master's research and my honours research in some ways are different, but they're also pretty much the same because they're around the issues of, you know,
so it doesn't matter the class. It doesn't matter the class of people you're looking at. The issues are always the same.
The issues are always the same.
The one class, the impoverished class, are kind of prisoners of their own circumstances because the only thing that's going to get them out of that situation is possibly education. How do you look at the middle and upper classes? They are trapped in a situation, whatever their situations might be. How do they break out? Tell us what your findings were in that research.
So my findings within the Muslim women that I studied was the case that we're sitting in positions where we get drawn into the system of capitalism and hyperconsumerism, and that becomes basically what our lives are about. We don't often sit back and reflect on who we are as people and what our purpose is and what our roles are and how we can contribute to society, but more so contribute to our own families, because that's where it starts. Be good mothers, be good leaders, be good women, be good friends, good sisters, good support systems for others. And in order to do that, we've got to sit back and think about our own emotional state and understand who we are as people and how we can be better. So that when we do respond to people and we interact with people, we're doing it in a way that's not necessarily objective, but like I said, a little bit more open-minded and a little bit more forgiving, less judgmental, more empathetic, more caring, more nurturing, more accepting.
But sadly, both groups of women or people that we're looking at, that you're talking to with your research, your honours and your masters, are trapped in their circumstances, different circumstances. How do they break out of it? You talk about the middle and the upper class women trapped in capitalism and consumerism. And I've often had these conversations with women in my group, friends, family, neighbours, and we bemoan the fact that we are victims of this capitalist society that we live in, but we don't know how to break out of it. Or perhaps we just want to add our voices to the situation, to the status quo, but we don't know how to break out of it. Do you have any answers?
I would say question everything. From a young age, I've always questioned things, and I was often criticized for questioning things. But as I get older and the more I study and the more I encounter people, the more I realize that questioning things and not taking things for granted and on a superficial basis is important. We, especially the youth, we need people to think further than their nose. We need to sit back. We need to look at things and ask the question, where does this come from? Why is something like this? What are the reasons for it? What's the historical context? Why is someone responding to a situation the way they are? Because more often than not, you'll see people respond to situations out of fear as opposed to them just being aggressive
or possibly not fitting in.
And not fitting in, yeah. And I mean, that's a big thing, right? Classifying people leads to stereotypes, and that's what we sit with. So if you see a woman walking down the road and she's wearing a hijab, more often than not you say, okay, that's a Muslim woman. Perhaps she's holy. Perhaps she's trapped within her house because she wears a hijab. But there's so many different facets to her. And so when you sit back and you say, well, what's really going on? Let me connect. That's when you really start learning about people. And I think that's the beginning of developing and really breaking out of the system, is not taking things for granted and just questioning all the time.
With your work, how do you hope to change, and I know you're one person, how do you hope to change the thinking of both these different groups of people? And I kind of made a statement earlier on about the impoverished people and suggested that their only hope of getting out of that prison that they're in is through education. But it's easier said than done, is it not?
No, it definitely is. And I would say that the contribution I feel I can make is to literally just sit there and listen to someone with no judgment, and let them feel that their struggles and what they're going through is not, it's important, and it's recognized and it's acknowledged, because more often than not that's what people want to feel. And to try and help someone look at the situation differently, and perhaps see different sides of the story, understand their situation from a completely different angle. Because we're so isolated and we're so one-track minded that we often miss important things, and things that can help us just be better by looking at things differently. So I sit down and I talk to people, and I try and help them, navigate their way around the difficult, conflicting matters that they find themselves in. But I also just try to force them to reflect.
Okay, we're going for an ad break. When we come back, we're going to look at drug addiction and violence in both groups, the impoverished and the middle and upper classes. Rahima Mohammed is our guest. She's an anthropologist and mediator. We're talking about issues right across the spectrum in the poorer societies and in the middle and upper classes as well. Are they the same? Do we then respond to them in the same way? How do we help these people get out of the prisons that they find themselves in? Stay with us, and we do hope that you have a couple of questions. Lines are open, so call in with your thoughts. I'm talking to Rahima Khalik Mohammed. She's an anthropologist and a mediator, and I don't think we have enough time to cover everything that I'd like to cover with her, because we've been talking non-stop off air as well. Rahima, back to you and your work, which is purely on a voluntary basis, and you are hoping to become a qualified mediator. But let's look at these two classes of people, for want of a better word, these two classes of people presenting with similar problems, abuse and drug addiction. Violence, abuse and drug addiction, and probably comes from the addiction, which then escalates into abuse and violence. Do you deal with them in a similar way? Because here I'm thinking the middle and upper classes are able to afford counseling, which hopefully will help them address their problems, understand why they are in the situation in the first place and address it. But the impoverished class do not have the means. They don't even have enough money to put bread on the table.
So, I think for me, in terms of the way I've dealt with the situation, it's exactly what you're saying. They're two different people. They deal with the same issues, so the approach I take is different, because the reality is the impoverished class of people, more often than not, the choice of becoming drug addicts and going into drug abuse is out of desperation more than anything. Because, for example, people can't feed themselves, and so sucking glue or sniffing glue is going to take that pain away. I think one of the most horrendous experiences I had when I was doing my volunteer work at the Domestic Violence Victims Empowerment Unit was, we had sons, and they were about between 18 to 25. Their mothers had to put up burglar barred gates on their bedroom doors, because due to the being so psychologically messed up on drugs, they would come home and try to insert their power. And so they were attacking their mothers sexually and trying to rape them at 3 o'clock in the morning. In that way, it's extremely difficult. yes, the people who are in the middle and upper class have access to going to rehabilitation, but even then, people don't realize what the root causes of needing to go into drug abuse is. So people sit back and say, well, you know, the rich people have money and so they're bored, and that's why kids in school go and do it. But what people don't remember is the importance parents have on children. Your mother and your father are your first teachers. They're your first role models. They're the ones that are going to provide you with the basic things like love and care and nurturing. And more often than not, even in middle to upper class, parents are working nowadays within our modern lifestyle. They don't have time to provide their kids with that love and care and that relationship that they need.
And the thinking
and they
is
want to
that
fill the void.
The thinking is that we'll provide you with a very good quality of life, but they're absent parents, and their absenteeism has created a vacuum in their children's lives.
Yes, and the one thing we forget also is that, you know, relationships between parents and children are dynamic. They will never stay the same. You as a parent, Islamically, you're meant to provide for your kids, give them shelter, give them clothes, give them food, give them love. But you're also meant to try and guide them to a point at which they can become adults and they can move out into the world. That's when your relationship changes with them. You're not just sitting there saying you need to go brush your teeth, you need to go to school tomorrow. You're saying, let's talk about things. Let's have a relationship where you can come to me openly and honestly, and I can agree to disagree with you. I can understand where you're coming from. I can tell you I think you're wrong, but I can also accept what your perspective is, because they're two different people. And more often than not, I think kids don't feel connected to their parents. They don't get that affirmation. They don't get that security, and they go looking for it elsewhere. And drugs, unfortunately, seem to be one of the easiest and fastest ways that kids do that nowadays.
Now, Rahima, let's look at anthropology. Why this field of study? It's a little known field of study, number one, and also you now involved in volunteer work. How does it impact on you? Because doing this type of work obviously does drain you, can drain you emotionally. How do you deal with all of that? So I've thrown 3 questions at you.
Yeah, so anthropology is a very under-acknowledged study within South Africa. I always say to people, archaeology studies dead people, we study alive people. We try to figure out why people do the things they do. And it's always related to the historical and socio-economic context and the political context of where someone finds themselves on a broader scale. So like I said, you know, when I studied anthropology, I felt like the perspectives I had and the questions I had, I could find answers but not be judged, and I felt accepted. You know, walking into a lecture hall and having someone say that time, for example, is something that we've been socialized into doing, it's a social construction, was profound. It completely threw me off, and I felt that was very interesting. And I started understanding that we can't just take people for granted and the choices they make and the places they live within. And it started making me understand Islam in a completely different light.
Mashallah.
And that was for me the most important thing, was I was looking not just at, you know, how do you make wudu? I was looking at understanding, why do we do it? What's the reasons for it? And I felt more connected with Allah, to be very honest, on a spiritual sense, because I started probing and I started researching for myself. Hadith, Quran, what the roles of women and men are, what the relationship between parents and children are, because I understood how to ask the questions and what questions to ask, as opposed to just saying, okay, so-and-so says this and this fatwa said that, and so we should just follow this and that and that. And ultimately, as a Muslim, your job is to go and seek for knowledge.
Absolutely.
That being said, it is an emotionally draining experience for me. I've developed a bit of a stamina.
The emotionally draining experience is working with people,
Working
obviously.
with people, yeah. I mean, but I'll be very honest with you. It's probably one of the most satisfying things for me.
As draining as it is.
As draining as it is, like I said, I've developed a stamina, so I can compartmentalize. But it's helped me deal with my own emotional stuff. I'm more reflective, I'm more grateful, I'm more appreciative of things, I'm less anxious, because I sit there and I look at people and I can really just in the moment say, okay, sure, you're going through something really difficult. And that's
Where
okay.
where to from here? Because I know you have a 1.5-year-old, the light of, or the apple of your eye.
Yes.
So obviously...
My biggest challenge.
So you are a mother as well, a wife and a mother. Where to for you from here? And I do know that you want to become an accredited mediator. Once that happens, are you going to change track, or are you still going to be involved in voluntary work?
So I've always said, and I think my husband's been quite profound in getting me to understanding this about myself. But my purpose in life is to basically help people, whichever way that is. I'm hoping to do another master's degree next year in psychology, so that I can do it maybe on a more individual basis. But I would like to do mediation, I'd like to do counseling, I'd like to continue what I'm doing. But I'm also open to different things and different experiences. And I'm hoping to create a career out of mediation, because we've got to pay the bills, right? So that's important. But yeah, so I'm hoping to do counseling, continue with the mediation, working with the amazing people I work with, and try to get funding for the people in the colored communities, because they're very much left out. And there's so many Muslim people there. And a lot of people we know come from there.
Of course, of course. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, accept all your du'as. May you continue touching lives in a positive way. And I have a gazillion more questions for you, but we've run out of time. Perhaps we should get together again sometime soon. Thank you indeed for being with us on the show. Your closing thought or take-home message for our viewers this morning?
I would say question things. Question who you are. Know who you are. Accept yourself, accept your positives and your negatives.
And then other people accept you.
And other people accept you, because we're all only human.
Thank you. That was the lovely Rahima Khalik Mohammed talking to us about the work she does, purely voluntary at this point in time, but she talks anthropology and mediation. Perhaps our young people watching the show this morning might want to look at this as a field of study. And that is all we have time for. A very big thank you to our production team. Until Wednesday morning at the same time, as always, it is Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا 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 هلا